As the prophet of esports, I rely on trustworthy and meaningful data every day. Data from our research partner, YouGov, offers the most complete view of esports fans and gamers in the world, providing context to who they are, what they think, the brands they buy, and things they do. YouGov's connected insights and research services inform strategy at every level. If you're a team, a brand, agency, or rights holder, you should be talking with YouGov. Their partners measure and maximize ROI and are telling compelling stories with data. Visit yougov.com/gaming-esports to learn more. Again, I love the big number stories, so I'm gonna start with this one. 1047 Games raises $100 million on the runaway success of its debut title, Splitgate. If you haven't, by the way, we did a podcast episode with Ian Prue, who's the CEO of Splitgate. Maybe one of you can look it up quickly, but I can't remember what episode number it was. Great episode. And they had just raised, just for some context, 10 million basically weeks, I feel like, before we had taped that podcast episode. So it was very recently. So it's not like they raised the 10 million. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, Paul. It was August 13th is the episode. So that was last month. Wow.
And so since May, they raised 3 rounds since May of this year. And this last one now is $100 million round. So they went from and their origin story, and we talked about this on the podcast, was that Splitgate was like made by 4 guys, right? Like it was this incredible sort of underdog story. Now they've raised $100 million. I'm curious what you guys think. You know, we've talked about how hot the game developer space is. Why? My fundamental question is why would no one have bought this studio 1047 before they raised the 100 million here? And is it just a question of you don't think 1047 would have ever sold? But like, why in an environment where we all agree that game developers are at a massive premium because there's not that many good ones and there's not that many of some scale, why allow a developer like 1047, if you're an Activision Blizzard, if you're an EA, if you're Microsoft, if you're anyone like that, why allow them to go raise 100 million instead of trying to buy them out earlier? Or in general, just comment on this fundraise if you have other thoughts.
I mean, it's a good. I think it's a good question. Why they didn't get bought? It is possible that maybe it's just they didn't want to sell. The 100 million seems really high. I mean, like, what do you think the valuation they're looking at or they got was?
That's what I was saying, because like you're getting like I look, the game is, a lot of people are talking about this game. Like a lot of people. It clearly is impressive, and it's an amazing story. But you got to assume, what if they're raising 100 million? They're probably raising that at $400 million valuation, right? Would be a guess, somewhere around there,
somewhere
right?
between 3 and 600 million, probably a reasonable range.
Yeah, and you know how much did Bethesda sell for? What was that? A $4 billion sale, right?
It was 7.
7 and a half.
Yeah. 7. I mean, it seems a lot for a first-person shooter from a small studio, right? To basically be valued at, what did you call it, a tenth of a Bethesda or something, right? You know, I don't know. I mean, I all the power to these guys. I think it's a huge success, and we don't actually know the valuation. But I agree, 100 million seems really a large amount to raise. Really, because what are they? How are they deploying that? Like, what would be the capital need on the business? You know, it obviously has to scale because there's a ton of new users. I guess they have to hire because they want to invest into the game and compete with the likes of Fortnite. But
it's free to play, right? So, I mean, we're just remembering from the episode, I think there was a lot of challenge when it first launched around actually having the live content to keep people engaged. So I just imagine that it's got to be scaling up to, you know, this is something we talk about all the time, you know, with the industry, about how it's not just about launching a game with the free-to-play model. It's very different than what it always was historically. It's not like the past where you could just put out a good game, sell it for $60, and like you could have 10 people make the game because all you have to do is just get it in people's hands. Now, if you're giving the game away for free, you need to keep people engaged. Otherwise, like, I was shocked by the stats he threw out on the podcast when I was listening to it. You know, I think he was talking about, like, actually, it was interesting when he started talking about, you know, the first time user experience where, you know, he said 50% or 80% of people were like getting crushed their first match. And then like 75% of those people were leaving. I think those numbers are slightly off, but it was something like that. Which makes you realize when retention is that bad and you're giving the game away for free, like you need to keep people engaged. And in order to do that, you need a team of developers to do that, to build that content.
I will say also that like the financing here, the story in this article is fantastic, right? They talk about how for the first 6 months, their first round, which was 6 months ago, he said it was extremely difficult. We talked to every investor on the planet and they all said no. So finally they get an investor. Then the next round, which is the round where we had interviewed them, like this is the one they had done right before we interviewed them, or before we interviewed him, was with human capital. And supposedly it went from a phone call to funding over a weekend. So like already massively faster pace. Now this third round, they supposedly 1047 picked and chose all of the funding partners because it was massively oversubscribed. And they have, again, a pretty who's who of venture capital funds in this round. They have Lightspeed, Insight, Anthos, Galaxy, Human, Draper, like a real who's who of venture capital in this deal. Is everyone just looking at this, guys, and going, good developer, novel game, Bethesda sold for $7 billion. I mean, this seems low risk, right? Someone's going to buy this for $2 billion or $1 billion or something, and it's an easy win.
Maybe.
I don't think so.
Yeah, what do you go for it, Jeff?
No, you go first, William, or Lindsay or Jimmy or something, whoever wants to.
No one wants
Lindsay,
to jump in.
I want to hear your take.
Everyone is too
like
polite.
A formed
Lindsay,
take. Yeah.
Lindsay, I'm calling on you, Lindsay.
I know, and I don't have a intelligent thing to say about this right now. So.
We never have
let me ask a more
to say. That's the whole point of the show.
Let me ask a more specific question. Is the $100 million going to hurt them more than help them? Is there the potential for that? One of the things the article alludes to is that, you know, $100 million for a team of fewer than 10 people, which Ian, I think on the podcast said that was wrong, that they have actually quite a few more people than that. But, you know, this is a lot of money. And let me just read Taylor's comment and I'll tie these two into my question. You know, Taylor said, I said it 2 weeks ago, Splitgate Esports is up next. Make original maps and not Halo remakes, create a league and watch it take off, right? Do we end up seeing this $100 million getting spent on flashy esports now? You know, maybe a $10 million prize.
Hope not.
That would be great.
I mean, but this is like the crux of every discussion we have about this environment, where it's like, hey, good management and a good financial strategy will take you really far. So, I mean, yeah, the $100 million could hurt if they spend it really stupidly and wind up making a whole bunch of bad decisions that make a lot of people mad, or they can scale really well and acquire new users and create new programs and make the game even more popular than it is right now. I mean, that's just, you have to admit,
it's a great time to be alive as a game developer when your one and only and your first game can attract $100+ million, $116 million of venture capital.
Flip side to that, is it a great time to be alive if you're a developer? Because let's say you're, I don't know, any number of major studios who literally dedicate hundreds of millions of dollars a year to a title, right? And your competitive set isn't just other studios that can dump hundreds of millions in, but like 4 guys who thought Portal was great and wish it had been baked more into Half-Life 2. Yeah, and I'm not trying to say that dismissively to the Splitgate guys. I think it's something incredible, but like that's scary when the distribution mechanisms and the baseline coding mechanisms are so ubiquitous now that you can have a hit game and it can come from anywhere, you know. And in this case, I think this is a little different in my mind from other indie successes, because the other indie successes were in indie categories, you know, like Metroidvania. Like, okay, I sort of get that a team of 2 or 3 people can do a really great Metroidvania, you know, like,
or like an Among Us or a Fall Guys
Among Us, yeah. But I kind of, and I'm not saying I say this, but I think people in general thought like there were classes of game that were just too expensive to disrupt, like shooters being first among them. They have so much, you need so much tight network code to get the reflexes and Twitch play to work. Graphics have really been a leading edge driver of shooters. Nobody really enjoys playing low res, Doom 3D, right? Like, I think people would have thought that genre, and candidly, there's so much money dumped into shooters and so many big players play in that market. Literally every major publisher has their marquee shooter, right? Like, I think it would have seemed like that market, if any market, would be sort of indie proof. And look, I mean, these guys, they've got a long way to go, but they've had a success that's big enough that clearly, even the most marquee expense-driven genres don't necessarily need to be that way. And that's not necessarily a barrier to competition.
It's a good point, William. I mean, I think if I distill it, what you're saying is, it's not a good time to be alive if you're a big game developer, but a small one, it's a pretty good time to be alive.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of being facetious with my comment, but yeah, that's sort of exactly right. It's great for small studios that want to be innovative and take risks. They can get big rewards. It's terrifying for large studios because the axis of competition is opened up very broadly.
Yeah. Robert, hey, Robert, good to see you. Welcome. Ramsey says, but can they compete with EA and Activision with 100 million? It's a lot, but not the scale of them.
So,
I mean,
I just want to point out, because I read that comment earlier. I mean, the one thing I would once again disagree a little bit with the premise where they're not necessarily competing with all of EA and all of Activision. I would look at it as, hey, they're competing against Respawn or they're competing against Sledgehammer, right? So they don't have to compete with the scale that EA and Activision have across all of their studios. It's, can Splitgate be competitive with Apex Legends, which, I would imagine their budget is not that different than 100. Like 100 million is a pretty serious budget for one game and one studio. So I wouldn't look at it exactly as you are looking at it. Ramsey.
Especially considering
maybe I don't know if
they
that's
built
correct, but that's
with
just
6
the way I'm
million,
thinking about it.
Right? Like,
yeah.
Jimmy, you were going to say something.
I look at it in a similar sense as Jeff, but I mean, I don't even think these guys compete against each other, which you guys might not like to hear. I think, when I look at Call of Duty, for example, in Activision, Call of Duty's competing with itself and it's losing, right? All of its users are just getting fed up with the game. We're not going to Apex or Splitgate or other titles because of the competition where maybe Apex introduced a new season, a new battle pass, a new LTM event like Fortnite that was interesting. We're leaving Call of Duty because there's too many hackers. The map is boring and old, and people are just getting bored with it right after 2 years. So I think Splitgate has an awesome. What I haven't heard said, and that I wanted to contribute. Splitgate has some 800,000 people in their Discord. They have a massive community, and their problem when we met with Ian and had him on the show was that they just couldn't keep their users happy and couldn't keep them sticking around. That's the best problem to have, right? Like the harder problem for other developers is getting the users in the first place. That's the competition, is like, how do I steal users from this person or the next? 100 million is more than enough to solve losing users by hiring engineers to innovate and update and patch their game. So I don't think they need to compete with EA. I think they just need to, I'm with Jeff in that they probably turned down acquisition offers at this stage, figured put 100 million into our game, stop losing users, and we'll continue to grow just off of our name alone. And again, they're the belle of the ball right now. So wonderful story and very happy for them. And Ian, if you're listening, awesome. It's been a month, man. Like, what is this?
It's an incredible story. Really, but it's a good game, right? Fundamentally, they deserve the success. Ramsey says, fair point, but I feel like the resources will go there once the big guys feel the heat. Yeah, but that's the nature of, again, startup and sort of big incumbent. The big incumbent rarely reacts until they feel, any kind of serious heat. They rarely get ahead of competitors or get ahead of problems.